It's another episode of the Talkin Solutions podcast, and I'm welcoming in Ms. Deidra Mayberry, the co-founder of Reading to New Heights here on this episode. And Deidra, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm so good, Will. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And Deidra, your solution is something that really intrigued me a little bit, in large part because I don't think anyone really talks about it. It's not something that's commonly known. At least for me and amongst the people that I'm aware of. And I like to think I'm commonly aware of most things, but maybe not this one, obviously. So I think it's important that we kind of get this message out and talk a little bit about what this problem is. So I would like for you, Deidra, just to chat a little bit about what Reading to New Heights is and the solution that it provides to this adult reading illiteracy problem that we have in the U.S. today.
Okay. Yeah. So Reading to New Heights, we're a nonprofit that support adults with their literacy. So whether they're functionally illiterate or they're just illiterate, we support by giving tutoring to teach them how to read like they're learning for the very first time. And our goal is to help them to have a better quality of life by getting such a life skill that is necessary.
Yes, it's essential to a large part of our jobs, especially whatnot as we grow more and more into the educational route with college and university. You said something there that I'd like you to define a little bit for the listeners. So we have obviously illiterate, which I think a lot of people are more familiar with that word, but then we have functional literacy is something that you had just mentioned as well. So can you just kind of define a little bit that problem and kind of where the average reading levels are and things of that nature? Because I think it's something that, a lot of people just really don't think about, to be honest.
Yeah. So an illiterate person is someone who cannot read or write at all. So I always like to define that for those who don't know. Someone who is functionally illiterate, they have some skills, but they don't have the necessary skills that they would need to truly function in life and to feel confident and comfortable. So that can be, they could be reading at a first, second, third grade level, or they can be reading at an eighth grade level, but still not as an adult where they would need to be from going through high school, even some college. And it's just really holes in their literacy. And, one of the most interesting facts is most adults are not reading above a sixth grade level. And really and truly, that's mind blowing when you kind of find out that information, which is why a lot of things are written at a lower level to make sure everyone can fully comprehend and get the information.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, when you're learned in your writing for the internet, for example, and online, or even in journalism at times, sometimes that you're taught to write at, what's called like a fifth grade reading level, right? And my initial reaction was, why a fifth grade reading level, and blah blah blah. And of course, there are many other factors that go into that reading level as well. But that's something that kind of clicks a little bit now. Like, oh, okay, so this is ensuring that everybody is accessible and can fully digest and understand everything. So I find that really interesting. And Deidra, I'd be curious to know, you've mentioned this before about having that kind of better life and opening up more opportunities to the ability to read is something I think that people that have no issue with that take for granted. What are some of the setbacks and the challenges that adults or people might be facing when they don't have a full functional literacy ability and things of that nature?
Yeah, there's truly so many, but just some of the bigger things that I think about is one, just their ability to really function through life. Something as simple as doctor's appointments. So most people can't fill out the paperwork. We've all been to the doctor. You have to fill out so much. And some people will just, due to being afraid of being exposed, they won't go to the doctor. They're taking the wrong medicines. They don't know the right doses. From something as simple as cooking instructions. One of the things I noticed a lot that I use personally on my stories, when you got to eat, and if you can't read the menu, you rely on the pictures. You rely on what's the special of the day. Well, what do you recommend and what do you love? And it's one of those ways that, you have to figure it out. Also, reading signs. So I know growing up, and even as an adult, I still know exits by numbers because I couldn't read what it said. So I had to remember all the numbers. So I'm like, oh yeah, it's exit 18. That's where I live. But I never could say the street name until I figured out what it was. So many things, from just directions, if you were having to take public transportation, reading maps, filling out your children's paperwork, even being able to support your children in school. There's just so many different things, jobs. So there's certain jobs you may not be able to have, or there are just so many limitations truly that you almost can feel hopeless and you can feel stuck and you can feel, well, I can't do this thing, so let me just do this other thing. And it just becomes, you dig yourself in a hole.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Like there are so many little things that you just think about non-consciously or subconsciously these days where it's like, oh, read a menu item, that's no problem. But, I think about, I've been fortunate enough to spend a good amount of time in foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously sometimes being in a foreign country, you can't understand the language. And then you're mentioning the reading and looking at pictures and then exit numbers. And I'm like, see, okay. And that is not the most convenient thing out there. It definitely requires little mental tricks and activity. But Deidra, I want to get a little bit more background on you a little bit and why you decided to start this great nonprofit Reading to New Heights and offering these programs and in a space that's comfortable for some of these adults to improve their reading levels on that nature as well. So tell me a little bit about yourself and why you decided to be a co-founder here for Reading to New Heights.
Yeah, so took me forever to say this out loud, but so growing up, I struggled with reading and I never really mastered it. So I just kept fumbling through. And then I became an adult who couldn't read. So in that, my own personal experiences of just the struggles and having these goals and dreams to do more, but knowing I was lacking a skill, so I couldn't do it. And I just remember when once I turned 18, I went to go try to get tutoring or help for myself or whatever that looked like. But because I was of age, I got turned away because I was no longer 17 years or younger. So there's lots of great programs for children, which there needs to be. But what happens when you're a child and you don't master it, then you become an adult who needs those same great programs. And what I found, I'm not saying that there weren't any, but they weren't accessible or they didn't work with what I needed at that time. So they have where you can go to a library in the back with like other people and teach you. But again, it's for a big class. Everyone's on different levels. If you have that stigma where you're embarrassed and you don't want anyone to know as an adult that that's your issue. So that's where I was stuck. And I just remember being like, one day I'm going to create something for people just like me. And then I just fumbled through life to make it work. And it took over 10 years for me to remember that was the promise that I made. And I said, it's time. When I started working on my literacy at 28, I shared with one of my friends and she started tutoring me. And when she did, it showed me that I just had holes and gaps. And once she started teaching me the foundations and I was able to bridge some of those gaps I was missing, my confidence just like shot through the roof. I was able to do more. I was able to advance at work. I was able to, actually do my job a lot better than the hours of productivity I was wasting because it took me much longer than other people to get things done. And I just remembered, like, I want to help other people do the same thing. And that's really my heart behind it and the passion. And then my goal was to start sharing with other people so that I could help remove the stigma. So when I shared with another friend, we decided to start a nonprofit. And where it was something I was going to wait until I was like retired to do, I'm so glad the friend gave the push to like, no, let's do it together. Let's do it now. This is great. Let's help other people. And so that's the story and the heart behind how we're here today.
Oh, that's so great. That's such a good, inspiring story as well. And you should take a second, and I'm sure maybe you do this, but yeah, definitely take a second, look at where you're at now, look back and go, wow, okay, I did it. I got a nonprofit going. I'm helping people. Like, I'm sure you have challenges and things you want to continue to improve on, but that's really remarkable that you're at this point, and especially helping out people primarily in the Dallas metropolitan area. And that is where you're based, and that is where a large part of your work has kind of taken place to this point, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. And then the exciting part about that, though, is you're hopping on shows. I saw you're on the Kelly Clarkson show and all that fun stuff as well. And you're kind of bringing this message to a more of a national level and things of that nature as well. And I know that virtual programs are something you offer, which we'll get into in a little bit when we really kind of deep dive into your solution. But I think that's a fantastic story of kind of what you're doing. I do have one question to kind of help people kind of get a little bit more context surrounding kind of people that are at a functional literacy level or, illiterate or whatever it may be. Are there certain areas where where it's more likely than others to find this kind of concentration and whatnot? Would it be, at that, from that perspective in terms of a demographic standpoint?
So it's a lot of low poverty areas, because what I always say is literacy does not discriminate on gender or race. It just really depends on, do you have the extra funds or the resources or even the education to be able to give the assistance that, that your child may need? Because, right, we start off as children and then we become adults, but are you able to really, really pour in and give that? In a lot of lower income areas, they can't. And that is one of the reasons we'll get into this later, but why our nonprofit is free. We don't charge because we want to remove that financial barrier, but that's where we see it a whole lot. And then even where so people that are functionally illiterate, they have jobs and they're doing things, they're just stuck. And it may be that financial resources, because tutoring is expensive. If anyone, you think about whether it's tutoring for a subject in school or even an instrument, it's pricey when you're meeting weekly, and it's not something that, gets done in 1 or 2 sessions. So sometimes people just can't, dedicate those funds to be able to take care of that issue.
Yeah, it is very expensive tutoring. I even having a distinct memory back when I was in high school, getting ready for the SATs and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I took a little SAT class, and I remember I can't remember my parents just being like, this is ridiculously expensive. You better do well, you know what I mean? So it is something that, that's another issue in and of that, is how can we make that more affordable? But, we can dive into that some other time. But Deidra, yeah, I'd love to kind of get down in the nitty gritty of it. I really want to talk about how Reading to New Heights is empowering these people and helping them improve their lives and being able to improve their reading, which obviously improves their writing, which obviously improves their ability to communicate. And it's just literally a snowball effect on that front as well. So if you could just kind of deep dive into some of the programs that you offer for people that can go in and take these. And we've talked a lot about that kind of stigma as well. So if you could just kind of share a little bit about how the programs work and things of that nature, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think it's always important to start that. So we started the nonprofit in March of 2020. As we all know, the COVID pandemic happened. 3 days after, we were already this is what we're doing. We're so passionate about it. And then we got the news. I'm sure everywhere else, we got shut down. So in that, we had to really come to the decision, do we still go forward or do we wait? And let's go forward. So in that, we offer just a one-on-one tutoring. And we do it in a sense of where we do small groups where we don't do any more than 3, so 2 to 3. But we really were trying to focus on the individual, because for these adults, they already have some skills. So our job is really to help bridge the gap of what they're missing, what things we need to focus on. So it really is your personal tutoring session, and where we do use a curriculum, but we tailor that curriculum to what the adult learner needs specifically. So there is a part that, everyone has to go through the curriculum, but we'll spend more time on what that individual needs. So for example, a lot can't decode the letters. So then we have a warm up where we'll spend that time to really dive in to get them comfortable with sounding out and decoding, whether it be blends or diagraphs or whatever that is. And it's something that we get them comfortable and we get them in a routine, because that's all reading is. It is just a routine of, learning the basics, and then it's just building on top of that. And So in that, our whole goal is, so let me back up a little bit. A lot of the adult learners, so there's great programs out there like GED preps, workforce development, but a lot of adults cannot successfully pass those because they can't read well. And in those programs, they're not teaching you how to read. They're prepping you for the GED. They're giving you a workforce development. So whether it's going to be forklift or phlebotomy or whatever that is, it's a very selected, field. But if you can't read, they're not teaching that aspect. So a lot of our adult learners, they haven't been able to make it through one of those programs. So what we do is we really help bridge that. So we're working on this part, and then the next step is, okay, are you now trying to get your GED? Then are you now trying to go to a workforce development course? Like, what does that look like for you? So we really support with that, but also too, depending on what their individual needs are. If, our tutors are so great and flexible. So if we have an adult learner that says, I have to read a lot at work and I just freeze up. So part of that, we'll have where we do cold reads with them. We'll pick a book, we send it to them so they both have it, whatever that looks like, and we really help them focus on that. Or if it's writing, we spend time to really adapt it to what they need. And for some of them, it's just, they truly, are reading at a first grade level and they need to really hone in on that. So it's really gives us the opportunity to really focus on what they need so they can feel comfortable and confident in their reading. And then so we can get them to their next goal.
Love it. Yeah. It's kind of like that step-by-step approach and just kind of building it up and building that confidence level and really kind of making it kind of skyrocket a little bit, huh?
Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. And one statistic that it's always heartbreaking to me is depending on how children do on their third grade test, that's how they determine how many bed cells that they're going to have in jail. So at that point, there is a direct line to literacy and incarceration. And for me, just reading that statistic and doing the research, I was heartbroken because I'm thinking, man, so we're giving up on people in the third grade, or we're already saying that this is what their life is going to be. And that was always my biggest thing is I don't want someone else to write my story. And that's why I fought harder to have a different outcome than what society shows based off of data and statistics, right? So it's just so important, I think, to share and to really wrap our minds around at the third grade, depending on how you do in that third grade testing, that is how they project bed cells for prisons.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think that's ridiculous that at third grade, 8 years old, what is that, 8, 9, something like that? I mean, you're now just kind of going, okay, well, this person's done. They didn't do well on a third grade test. Well, what if you're not a good test taker?
Yep.
You know, I mean, what about all the, wow, that is not good. So I'm happy that you're aware of that and being able to kind of at least bring some information to it, because that's something that, we're working to get solved, which is, great what you're providing for the adults as well. That brings me to kind of a question then on that front. What are the numbers in the Dallas level? And then obviously, if from a national level of people that are kind of functionally literate or even illiterate at that point, what are those kind of numbers look like?
I think one of the biggest things, so I'm going to do the reverse. So in the US, there's 43 million adults who cannot read past a third grade level, which is, when you really stop to think about that, is just shocking, right? And in Dallas, though, it is by 2030, it's estimated that there will be 1 million illiterate, not functionally illiterate, but illiterate adults in Dallas County alone. And when you really think about that, that is just shocking. It's just truly, truly shocking. And, we have to do something, right? That's why we're here. We're helping the other organizations that are already out there to really help to combat this. And I think we even need to do it from a world standpoint of how do we support, how do we add in those extra resources? How do we really, pour in? And a lot of people and organizations and businesses, when they think about um, education and pouring into literacy, they think K through 12, which is great, right? Because they're the future. But what I think we fail to realize is, but their illiterate parent has a direct line to the future. And if they're, if they can't read, if they can't help, what things are they instilling in them? What things are important? Are they, sometimes you have the reverse. Some people, if they struggle with reading, they make their children like, you got to do this, you have to read, and they like shove it down their throat. Some do, but a lot don't, because they don't want to be exposed by their child that they can't read. Because there's this, like, as a parent-child thing, there's this respect thing. You don't want to feel, that vulnerable with your child at that level. So a lot of them are just like, all I care about is you graduate in high school. I don't care what else happens. Just got to do that. So when you really think about it, and the pandemic really helped parents to see that they couldn't help their kids. It helped them to see when they were at home doing virtual school, that the parents were overwhelmed. The parents were like, where are the teachers? And I always believe that we're teachers, we put so much on them, but it really needs to be a partnership. The teacher is taking care of the kids at school, and then when they come home, you're picking up and you're doing the homework and you're practicing and you're making sure they understood the work. And sometimes that's not happening if the adult can't help. The only education that the kid's getting or the practice is at school.
Right, exactly. And there are other consequences of it as well. I mean, you're talking about a direct line, right? Not even just education, but, what happens if, because they, are having struggles with their reading, maybe they're having struggle at work or something, and then maybe they're food insecure. I talked to some guy recently out of the St. Louis area who was creating a really cool program, and he mentioned 40 million adults are food insecure. Obviously, please don't take this as a direct correlation. It's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying, in my mind, the way that it's kind of progressing is it's kind of popped up like that, and you see the chain reaction into different things, and if that family's food insecure, then that kid's likelihood of learning how to read is even decreased more. And it's just, I think that there needs to be definitely more of a direct impact on the adult as well. Because like you said, it's streamlined to that next generation.
Yeah. And no, you're right. There's so many things that are connected that we don't even really take time to really process. So that's a great, point that you bring up. And even in those, like I said, a lot of lower poverty areas, you don't have a lot of those healthier food choice options or those gardens or different things like that. So it really it can just keep things really, really on the down slope.
Exactly, not good.
Yeah. So it all makes sense. It all really goes together. So I think that's the thing I always try to educate when I have the opportunity to be on any funding panels, to really talk about that. Because there's not even options when we're applying for grants. At times when we go under education, it's K through 12. So we're like, well, we technically don't, fit under there. So we normally have to go under income, because in us helping with this skill set, it will help them to have a better income that will help society, and all the things. So it's just so interesting, just the thought process and all of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, reading is essential. I mean, anybody who does well in life and things of that nature, they always say, "Oh, I read." I mean, it opens you up to new perspectives. It opens up to new ideas, and the ability to have that is taken for granted, because it really does open up all those doors, like you said. Yeah. But I want to kind of ask a little bit as well in regards to that, because you've mentioned a few times about, kind of a safe space. And then obviously there is a stigma, right? I mean, if most adults, if you were to tell them like, oh yeah, this person can't read and it's an adult, like it would kind of be like, what? And that's an unfortunate reality. So with that stigma, I know you mentioned keeping classes one-on-one, even sometimes 2 to 3 as well. What type of reaction are you getting from the adults that are joining your program and kind of getting into this safe space and feeling comfortable and responsible? I got to imagine that it's probably pretty enlightening, and it's got to feel pretty good, especially as they improve.
Yeah. So I always have to say this first is I was so ashamed and I was hiding. And I think the first time that was on the news to share about the nonprofit, and the phone was ringing off the hook, and everyone had the same messaging. I've been waiting for something like this my whole life. Oh my God, you get me. You know my story. I have your story. And it was so overwhelming, because I think when And I say shameful because it was for me. I think when, you have a shameful secret, you think you're the only one. You think, oh, well, it's me. I'm the only one that's experiencing this and going through this. But then you always find out that there's other people. There's other people that have experienced your same thing. You're not special in the sense that you're the only one that gets to go through this, right? So in that, it's been so great for them to know that there's hope. And for them to know that, man, I share in your story and you're doing these things and, you've worked on it. So gives them hope. And that's always beautiful to see, because you can see when people are just, hopeless, and you see it in their demeanor and their posture and their tone, like, and what they talk about. So to get on the phone and to do these intake calls and to hear them, it's like Christmas, and they're like, oh, when can I start? And I'm like, okay, well, hold on, there's a process, right? And it feels so good. And when so we record, the sessions or whatever that we don't share, obviously, but it's for us, just for like data purposes. And when I get to watch and when I get to go back and see where they started to where they are, and just their conversations and their comfort, and then spitting out spelling rules and having to explain them, and it feels so great. Like, and I'm always like, okay, this is why I do what I do, and it's beautiful to see. I remember one in particular, before she started, didn't have a job. She got a job. She went and took her license, passed the test, bought a car. And I just, some people get to do that at 15. So for this person to do it at 25, it's beautiful, and it's so great. And the excitement, and then just to where they're no longer ashamed. They're sharing with people. Well, I tried. They probably know I misspelled it, but I did really good, and I'm like, okay. So to just hear that and to see their confidence level, to see their improvement, is really great. And then a lot of them to know that they have children that are struggling with reading too. And for them to say, I teach my children what I learn here, and they're improving, and, they got a better grade, and we read every night. And, it's those moments that feel super great, just to know that we have the opportunity to be a part of someone's journey for the better. And it's so great. And that was my thing. And when we shared, I never wanted to come to a place of negativity and let me tell you all the bad things and how we got here. Obviously, bad things happen while we got here. But I wanted to have a solution, and I wanted to say, yes, these things happen, but here are some things that we now have in place to support with that. So for them, it's just exciting. Yeah, it feels so good. I'm so proud. There's moments I'm like, oh, when you graduate college, I want to be there. I think that, right? I'm like, I want to be there. I want to be there rooting for you. Or when you take your first trip, we have some that have never been on a plane, obviously because of reasons, and they have these dreams to travel the world. I'm like, please send me a postcard when that happens. Because as a traveler, as you mentioned, it's scary, and reading saves you, because even when you don't know the language, you know enough to kind of fumble through. And if you don't have that, you feel hopeless and probably really scary.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing. That's such a great story. I mean, you mentioned so many great things and opportunities of people just feeling elated. One thing that popped into my head as well, you mentioned the parent reading to the kids. That's a childhood memory of mine. You read it. My dad used to read before bed or whatever it might be. And then you kind of get that story and you get that exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I don't know what it's like nowadays with tablets and everything like that, but I hope that the reading is still there and all that front. So it's so great. I want to ask you, Deidra, you mentioned, you feeling shameful, obviously, and I'm sure it took a lot of courage and it took a lot of pep talks maybe to get yourself to kind of come out there as well, to share your story on that front. How did it feel when you first were able to just kind of come out and say it? And then, like you had mentioned before, seeing that inbox flood of people that were also doing it. I imagine from a personal level in that moment, that had to validate kind of everything about what you were doing.
Yeah, I think the first time, so one of my best friends, when we were launching the nonprofit, we did like a social media thing. And she was like, Fran, I got to tell you something. I was like, okay. She was like, you got to be all in. You're not all in. I said, what do you mean I'm not all in? Like, I've done all this work. am all in. She's like, you have to share your personal story. And I died in that moment. I was like, what? My personal story that I hid my whole life from everybody? And she was like, yeah, you have to share your personal story. You can't do this work if you're going to be so ashamed. And I was just like, but I can't. She was just like, even though you've done the work, you're still are so ashamed. You have to share your personal story. So it was probably the most courageous thing I have done in my life. So being able to put it out there and to say it, I felt proud of myself first. Like, Deidra, girl, you go girl, because I knew the weight that it held for me personally, and how I was so ashamed and so fearful about what people would say and what we would think. And, we're in an era of like social media where everyone's voices are heard, which I think is beautiful, but in the same, it cannot feel so good to other people who, may be the topic. But it was the response that I got when I shared was very different than what I thought it would be. It was people that were just like, so proud of you. I would have never known. I didn't know. And the secret messages of, I have the same problem. My uncle has the same, and just everyone identifying with like, I know when we hide it, right? Type of a thing. And then the people who've been waiting on me. That I think was the biggest, like, okay, they were waiting on you. So you shared and you were vulnerable so that they can have an opportunity, and that will always be okay every day, regardless of, and even every time I have to share, a part of me is like, okay, but a bigger part is, but I'm doing it for other people. I want to be hope for other people. I want people to know that it's never too late. That's one of our slogans that we say. That, it's never too late, and I really believe that. So it helped. It gets easier. Every time I share, it's easier, but there's still a part to where it was a huge part of my story. It was a huge part of like, my character building and why I treat people the way that I do, and just, different things. So yeah, but it felt great to know that like, people needed me to share. People needed the solution that we provide, and it brought them hope. So that was, it was just, it just warms my heart every time I think about it. So yeah.
Amazing. I mean, that's what life's about, right? Positively impacting people around you and doing that. And it seems that you were doing a good part of that more so than most. So that's fantastic. I love that solution. I love the feedback that you got for making yourself vulnerable and sharing that story and being able to uplift and help so many other people kind of along the way as well. So that's really encouraging. I love how focused you are on the present and the solution as well.
Yeah.
And the optimism surround that. Like, yes, obviously, due to circumstances in the past that unfortunately cannot be changed, and you're focusing just right now and say, hey, it's not too late.
Mm-hmm.
You can change, you can learn, and it's going to still empower you to do all these great things. I love that message.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, beautiful message.
Thank you. Yes. So important, but
yeah. But what are some tips? What are some kind of actionable tips out there for people that, for example, if they're listening and if they are relating to this and they feel like, they are not reading at a level that they should be on as well, what are some things that people can maybe kind of take for steps, whether that's helping to improve their own literacy skills as well, or helping to feel more comfortable about it? What are some things that you think people can kind of do to kind of get them started on this process?
Yeah, so I am a subtitle fan. So when you watch movies, put on the subtitles. There's just something for the picture in our brains that just help. And it was truly my saving grace. Movies and just different things, no matter what the topic is, put on anything, but put the subtitles on so you can start seeing the words as you hear the words. It's always a great trick. Reading 15 minutes a day, no matter what it is, just reading 15 minutes a day. No matter if it could be a children's book, it could be something you read before, but just dedicating 15 minutes a day to reading out loud. That way it helps kind of with the confidence level and just that cold read of, not feeling like you're on the spot or whatever that looks like. And then if going through, I always say, Like, go through the alphabets. Like, do you know all the sounds that they make? It's something so simple, but are you confident with that? And where, we have a lot of sight words, most of our vocabulary is made up with sight words that you can't phonetically sound out. But you want to be able to feel comfortable in the letters and the sounds that they make so that as you see them. So, and something is like simple on YouTube for children that's, 2 minutes long, like just taking a look at that, quiz yourself, see what you know. And if you fumble on something, then, take the time to figure it out. But just, and then not being afraid to ask for help. Regardless of what it is, how big or small, if you don't understand something, if you don't know something, like just taking away that fear to ask for help. And yeah, we're talking about reading, but even if it's directions, even if it's, your tie is really nice today. How did you tie your tie? That way, just kind of welcoming a space of just asking for help and just humbling ourselves, I think is just a good practice that helps with bigger things later.
Yes, exactly. Humbling ourselves is always a good thing, right? Always a little bit good.
Yes. A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. That's so good though with the with those actionable tips. The subtitles are really a good idea. I think that works really well. Reading, a children's book and kind of progressing upwards. Reading every time a day. It's great for the mind. It's stimulating. So I think those are really great actionable tips on that front as well. But Deidra, I want to ask a little bit now about how people can support. How can people get started if they're listening and they want to enroll? How can they enroll and things of that nature as well, and to figure out some ways. So I guess first and foremost, if somebody out there listening feels like this is a program for them, how can they enroll and get involved?
Yeah, so on our website, which is readingtonewheights.org, you can enroll there. We also, on the enrollment piece, we have our number because if you need help, you can call and we will enroll for you because most people may not be able to fill out the application. We understand that. So that's one way, or just calling. So that's how you get enrolled. Any of our social media platforms, we always have a link to different things that we post about. So whether it is, enroll today, volunteer today, donate today, all that's always, you're going to find that on our social media platforms, which Reading to New Heights. We are on Facebook. We're on IG. I think our Instagram is reading to_heights or something like that. But if you type in Reading to New Heights, you'll see it. It has our logo. And then we're also on LinkedIn, just Reading to New Heights. So those are all the ways. And if people want to get involved, like just call and ask questions. If you don't know if it's for you, where are you? That's why I always like to mention functionally literate. You don't have to not know anything at all. We have people that have graduated college that are in our program because they're still not reading well. And that's a whole different, topic that I get lots of questions about because I actually graduated through college as well. But so just calling to ask the question, signing up, whatever that looks like. But if you know anybody who you might think, could use this, don't tell them you can't read, take this program. Just share. Hey, I heard this really cool thing today. Sometimes it's just putting it in front of people and letting them do the work the rest of the way. So that's how you can get involved if you need the program. And if you are a certified educator, so we use all of our volunteers are certified educators. We do that because learning is a skill in itself, but teaching adults is a whole different skill. Because they come learned already. They've had to figure out life, where children are sponges. You can tell them anything and they're like, yes, okay. Adults, we have lots of questions. We can be the worst students sometimes, but it's good because we have lots of questions because we need to understand. So if you are a retired educator, if you're a current educator, and you have a passion to kind of pour in and to give back, in a very different way. We always need volunteers. We have a huge waiting list just because of some of the great opportunities. Kelly Clarkson brought a lot of people our way. And, there's a lot of people that need help. And so our minimum, requirement is 4 hours a week, and that allows you to serve two students. So in that, it's not a 20-40 hour, gig. It's 4 hours a week. So if you have a passion, if you are retired, you're current, certified educator, please, and you're interested, again, on the website under the Get Involved, you'll be able to sign, to fill out the volunteer form, or even send an email if you want to have a conversation first to see if it's the right thing for you. That is one way that you can get involved. And of course, if you don't need, if you're good at reading, you don't need the support, or if you're not a certified educator and you want to give back in a different way, donations are always helpful in running a nonprofit. So it allows us to continue to expand our reach and to serve more adults. Due to one of the donations we got, we were able to actually hire our first part-time instructor. So that allowed us to get some of those people off the waiting list. So we're super excited, and it was a huge milestone for us as a newer nonprofit. So that's great. So those are like our three big ways. And really number four, like awareness, share. We really want to remove the negative stigma behind adult illiteracy. We want people to get help, and we want people to invest in themselves by just getting the help so that they can have a better quality of life, because it just grows our society. It just supports our society in a huge way. So just awareness.
Awareness is always fantastic, and it's easier than ever nowadays. Like you mentioned, if you don't have any money to donate, but you love the cause, follow on social media, reshare a few posts, things of that nature. Lots of great ways that you can do to kind of assist on that front as well. Deidra, I want to ask too, you mentioned kind of the waiting list and getting educators on board as well. Is that the biggest challenge, or what would you say is the biggest challenge for the nonprofit right now? Is it getting all those educators to match the people that need it?
I think the biggest, so here's my perfect world. I was like, yes, we're going to, volunteer. And I'm a huge volunteer. So I volunteer so many different things. So like, yes, it's going to be great. We're going to just have volunteers and it's going to work. I did not know the need was so great. The need to where it was overwhelming, to be truly transparent. I was like, so many people need this, So I think that is the biggest like need and opportunity, is we didn't realize so many adults needed the help that they do. And because we want a great quality, and we just, there's lots of people like, oh, I'm a banker, I'll volunteer. And we're like, oh yeah, but you're not an educator. So sorry, So I think just really being able to, and we're battling the pandemic. A lot of educators, once the pandemic happened, it shifted. It's so much. Like, I'm grateful the volunteers we got, we asked them before we knew that we were going into a global pandemic, and they tell me all the time, oh, I would have told had it been after. So we're seeing that, we're not getting as many volunteers as I thought we would have after the pandemic hit. So it makes sense now, because teachers are tired. A lot of them have shifted out of teaching altogether. So just having to realize that, which we're going to have both paid instructors and volunteers to be able to really meet the need that's out there. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, exactly. With that, just to clarify though, in case any potential educators are listening, it is virtual as well. Like, you can do this at a virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You can be anywhere. And you can volunteer if that is something that, you're passionate about. So yeah, we are in Dallas, but we have volunteers that are in California, New Jersey, New York, and then some other like San Antonio, like, just things here too. So like I said, the pandemic helped us to just have a further reach, or it probably would have been a little more challenging. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The virtual world has certainly taken off a little bit on that front, in all areas on that aspect with it as well. So that's really good. So any educators out there listening, or anybody with that background, be sure to volunteer if you got some free time with it. It's just a few hours a week on that front, and you can apply going to the website, or you can contact them today for more direct information. And if you are interested and you're not an educator, you can make a donation, which is always helpful for nonprofits as well. Deidra, I want to leave you with this, just kind of one last question. What are the plans? Obviously, you're still in the early innings, the young stages of Reading to New Heights. What do you hope to accomplish in the next coming years and whatnot with this program?
Yeah, so we really want to be global. We want to be in multiple states. We really want to try to support adults everywhere so that we can just have a better world. So that is our ultimate goal. Is we want to grow. We want to support. We don't want to be limited to Dallas, Texas. Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic. A better world is great for everybody. And the tool reading is huge. As we mentioned a little bit in part of the conversation, it just snowballs and affects so many different things with a correlation link. So, Deidra, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your mission and your solution to how you're helping adults improve their reading and enhance their lives and enhance the lives of their children and all the positive things that kind of come with that as well. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you feel like maybe we missed or anything on this episode that you want people to know about?
No, I think, just again, share. Awareness is key to help to just empower people to just take the next step. So just sharing and helping to empower those to just to do the next thing. Yeah.
Love it. Deidra, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've had a blast speaking with you, learning about your story and the positive and the optimism that you're bringing, and then also your ambition and drive to help make this world a better place. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is the co-founder of Reading to New Heights, Deidra Mayberry, joining us here on the Talkin Solutions podcast. She mentioned all of her links on social media, ways that you can get involved in her website. If you're listening to this during the episode launch week, those will be available on our Instagram, on our Linktree page. And then, of course, we'll have her on our new website in Reading to New Heights as well. So you can find some more information there about how you can support, how you can get yourself enrolled, or how you can help as from an educator perspective, these people enhance their lives through reading and things of that nature as well. So you'll find all of that on our usual links on that front. Other than that, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, drop a rating, always appreciated, and give us a follow on as well on our social media and subscribe to the channel going forward. So thank you so much for listening to this edition to the Talkin Solutions podcast, and I will catch you on our next episode. Thanks for listening to the Talkin Solutions with the Chesh podcast. Tune in every Wednesday for a new episode, and you can find out more about our featured guests and their solutions on our Talkin Solutions podcast Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channels, as we focus on highlighting individuals providing solutions to social problems and bringing optimism to the world.